U.S. newspapers hit back at Trump, defend free press. Washington. U.S. newspapers are big and small hit back at President Donald Trump's relentless attacks on the news media, with a coordinated campaign of editorial highlighting the importance of a free press. Leading the charge was the Boston Globe, which had issued an appeal for the drive accompanied by the #EnemyOfNone hashtag that has been joined by more than 300 newspapers around the country. Today in the United States we have a president who has created a mantra that members of the media who do not blatantly support the policies of the current U.S. administration are the enemy of the people, said the Globe's editorial. It's one of the many lies that have been thrown out by this president. Much like an old-time charlatan thrown out of magic dust or water on a hopeless crowd, it adds in a piece entitled, "Journalists are not the enemy." Quote, the effort comes amid Trump's persistent claims that mainstream media outlets publish articles critical of him are churning out fake news, The New York Times, frequently targeted by Trump's criticism, ran a 7-paragraph editorial under a giant headline with all capital letters that read, "A free press needs you." The Times writes, "It is dangerous. Period. And the call of journalists, enemy of the people, is a danger to the lifeblood of democracy." Other newspapers said Trump's attacks diminish the importance of journalists in their communities. For more than 2 centuries, since the birth of our nation, the press has served as a check on power, informing Americans about corruption and greed, triumphs and tragedies, grave mistakes and misdeeds, and even ineptitude and dysfunction, wrote the Albuquerque Journal in New Mexico. Iowa's Des Moines Register said, "The true enemies of the people and democracy are those who try to suffocate the truth by vilifying and demonizing the messenger." Trump doubled down on his criticism on Thursday in a fresh 3-part tweet storm attacking the media. "The fake news media is the opposition party. It is very bad for our great country, but we are winning," the president wrote on Twitter. "The fake news media is the opposition party. It is very bad for our great country, but we are winning." The Boston Globe, which was sold to the failing New York Times for $1.3 billion plus $800 million in losses and investment, or $2.1 billion, was then sold by Times for $1. Now the Globe is in collusion with other papers on free press. Prove it. There is nothing that I would want more for our country than true freedom of the press. The fact is that the press is free to write and say anything it wants, but much of what it says is fake news, pushing a political agenda, or simply trying to hurt people. Honesty wins. Free press advocates argue that Trump's attacks threaten the role of the media as a check against abuse of power in government and undermine constitutional First Amendment guarantee of freedom of press. "I do not think the press can just sit back and take it. They need to make their case when the most powerful man in the world tries to undercut the First Amendment," said Ken Paulson, an editor-in-chief of USA Today who heads the museum's First Amendment Center and is a dean of communications at Middle Tennessee State University. But Paulson questioned whether editorials would be effective. "The people who read editorials do not need to be convinced," he said. "They are not the ones trying to shout you down at presidential rallies." The campaign also faces the potential of galvanizing supporters of the president around the notion that media is out to get him. Politico media writer Jack Schafer said the coordinated effort is sure to backfire. It will provide Trump with the circumstantial evidence of the existence of a national press cabal that has been convened solely to oppose it, he said. The San Francisco Chronicle said it would not join the effort because it plays in Trump's narrative that media are aligned with him, but the newspaper said it would continue to speak out against this president's war on free press, doing it in our own way. on our own schedule, but media rights advocates say the stakes are too high to allow the president's claims to go unchecked. Some say Trump's comments have incited threats against journalists covering his events, and may have created a climate of hostility that opened the door to violent attacks like a deadly June against Capitol Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland. Trump's actions are also encouraging strongmen such as Vladimir Putin of Russia and Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey to treat journalists like enemies, some newspapers said.